when we look at eczema, people go, well, it's a skin issue. So I'm going to find the cream. I'm going to look for the one cream, the one detergent. And there's no one thing. We have to heal the skin from within. What's happening, and one of the reasons I love to treat eczema, not because I want to see kids in pain, but because you can see it and you can deny it that it's there. So you can deny behavioral issues. You can deny belly issues, right? You can deny all these things. Eczema, you can't. It's right there. And what it is that the gut, usually what I tell people, whatever your child's skin looks like, that's what their gut looks like. It is an outside view of what the inside looks like. And when your skin from the outside is scratched and bleeding and cut apart and oozy, that's what the gut's looking like. And we're putting processed food in these bellies. And we're putting foods that are very inflammatory in these bellies. It's just basically putting the nails on eczema and just digging and scratching, and things keep getting worse and worse.
Welcome to the Soaring Child podcast, where parents of children with ADHD learn tips and tricks to help their child soar at home, at school, and in life. We feature interviews with experts, medical professionals, and parents just like you who are learning how to reduce ADHD symptoms using food and other natural strategies. Because children with ADHD deserve to soar just like every other child. I'm Dana Kay, your host. Now it is time to welcome Dr. Anna Maria Temple to the Soaring Child. Hi, Dr. Anna Marie. Thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to it all week.
Yes, no, I'm super excited to be here. I was just thinking back to the last time that we were together in the beautiful Puerto Rico. Oh my gosh, I'm just thinking about wanting to go back there for sure.
Oh my God, that was so gorgeous. So gorgeous. It was very hard to go to conference when you're in that gorgeous place.
I know. Someone said, oh, did you spend much time outside? I'm like, we were inside most of the time.
It's going to be my suggestion box. Can we please do this around the pool?
Yes. I love it. I love it. So look, we're here today to talk about eczema, and it's really, really interesting, because we get lots of kids with ADHD, coming to our program that have eczema. And so I really wanted to get you on here to discuss that because, a lot of the time it can be tied to the gut. And so I really wanted to, hear your expertise on it. I know that you are the go-to person for eczema. So, I want to start, at the beginning. So I want you to tell me a little bit about what eczema is. I mean, most of us have an idea of what it is, but how does it sort of differentiate from, say, like dry skin or dermatitis?
Right. Now, I think it's a great question. And I do see a lot of combination from eczema to behavioral issues and ADHD. So I'm excited to kind of discuss with everybody how the link works. But eczema is usually red, patchy. It looks inflamed. It looks like red hot lava. I'm a pediatrician, so I talk in like kid terminology. So, a lot of times in babies, we'll see their cheeks be red hot lava. And it may be just like, oh, we're going outside and it's really cold. But when you come inside, the red cheeks go away. Eczema is when those red cheeks don't go away and they get worse and worse. And now we're eating strawberries and now the red cheeks are flaring even more. Or now we're eating bananas and avocado. And I'm not beating up on food. I'm just giving examples. And then now all of a sudden, the redness from the cheeks now is red hot lava neck. And now we have cradle cap that seems to be crusty and oozy yellow. And then older kids, it's like let's say that they have a dog or they're eating whatever food and then they go outside and pollen. Now they have itchy, red, irritated skin in the creases of their elbows, behind their knees, ankles, top of hands. A lot of adults suffer for right on in their hands and their feet. And a lot of us mamas, after washing so many dishes and butts and laundry and other things, right? We'll get irritated on our hands. But dermatitis is like, okay, well, I'm going to put like a little cream, make sure I wear my gloves when I wash dishes, and then it's gone, it goes away. Eczema likes to recur and it gets worse and it's itchy. And we have kids that have dry skin, but it's not just dry skin. It's dry skin and then they sit and they scratch and they dig and they have trouble sleeping at night and they're crying throughout the day. And it seems like whatever they eat, they flare up. They go outside, they flare up. They see the dog, they flare up. And it becomes a vicious cycle that is so stressful and frustrating for so many families.
Oh no, well I think that's a really great explanation, and I couldn't imagine myself having that red hot lava on my body, let alone a little child who just doesn't understand what's going on. Now, I am very much about the natural approach, as I'm sure you know, and as I'm sure you are as well. And so I just would love to hear your thoughts on, when it comes to prescribed medication for eczema, what are your thoughts on that?
I get very wary because a lot of the prescribed medications are topical steroids, oral antibiotics, and of course, the latest and greatest Dupixent. And I say that with a lot of sarcasm. My issue with Dupixent, I'm not saying that can't help some people, right? Modern medicine can help some people, but we've taken the some people and now we're applying it to all people. And Dupixent in kids, which is just a hot name and a hot topic that a lot of people know these days, actually was FDA approved in 2017 for adults and in 2020 for kids. So we do not have that much data on this medication. We do not know the long-term effects of Dupixent. In fact, my hair lady today, she has eczema and she's been following me along. She's like, I know to do these things, but I started Dupixent. But you know what's weird? I have this eye thing and my vision is blurry in my left eye. Oh. And I went to the ophthalmologist and they gave me steroids for my eye, but they're not sure if it's related to Dupixent. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like the number one side effect is vision changes and abnormalities from Dupixent. And a lot of people are not talking about it. So my issue with prescription medication is not that it's not beneficial, because it can help some people, is that we go to it as our first go-to before we actually go, hey, listen, what's the root cause of this? Could it be the food that you're eating? Could it be the shampoos you're using? For my hair lady, she's surrounded by chemicals all the time. Okay. Could it be the parabens and the phthalates and the fragrance that are actually irritating her body, because maybe her actual job is contributing to a lot of her inflammation. But instead of having that combo, it's like, well, you can have Dupixent and don't change anything else. So we become a culture of convenience, and the convenience is leading us to these Band-Aid methods, because Dupixent doesn't fix eczema, just Band-Aids it. And then you develop more and more issues down the road. And you're like, oh my gosh, how did I get anxiety? Why do I have Crohn's disease? How did I develop ulcerative colitis? Why do I have crippling anxiety? Because the body was trying to tell you something was wrong with the eczema, but we didn't listen. We took the Band-Aid and now the body just kept on going.
Definitely. Very much the same as ADHD. And, I completely agree. It's the same with ADHD. You go to the doctor, the first thing they give you is a prescription. That should not be the case. And, as I said, I've got so many families that come to me whose kids have had terrible eczema and have been on these medications. I had one family whose kid was on 4 medications for eczema, asthma, allergies, all of that stuff. But when we went down the natural approach to help the gut and help change all the food and the toxins, they were able to get off all of them. Now, just for the listeners out there, what are some of those common prescription medications that you talked about? Are there any ones that for babies that carry concerns? Are there any common ones that actually increase the risk of eczema?
Yeah. So, for the actual eczema, so we have topical steroids. Yes. And then when they're used, there is a thing that's called topical steroid withdrawal, which is a horrible condition. Oh. And then we have, of course, the oral antibiotics we talked about. We have oral antihistamines. And of course, we have oral steroids as well. So all these, of course, are very harsh to the system. But what a lot of people don't know is that the medications that are linked to the increased appearance of eczema is actually Tylenol. And, because we give babies Tylenol that it's no big deal. Everyone is teething. Honestly, I was like, people don't teeth for 6 months, and it's like they're teething, and every time they don't sleep, it's teething, and they cry, it's teething. Teething is overly diagnosed by the parents because they want to put a name to the fussiness. And then they're like, well, let me give them Tylenol. Tylenol is sugar, and I'm sorry, but also food dyes. And then when you're taking Tylenol, the baby feels better, but oftentimes it's the actual sugar. It's the placebo effect. It's not really the Tylenol. But with each dose of Tylenol, we increase the risk of eczema in some kids up to 30 or 40%.
Wow, I had no idea.
One dose of Tylenol, and we give it out like it's no big deal. Oh, they have a fever of 101, boom, Tylenol. They're teething, boom, Tylenol. They have a boo-boo, boom, Tylenol, because my doctor says it's safe. And for a lot of people, it's like, that's weird. I've never heard about eczema and Tylenol, because when you Google eczema, it's going to come up with dogs, environment, smoking, right? It doesn't, you're like, I haven't seen Tylenol. Google, change your search. Is Tylenol linked to eczema? You'll see Google blow up, because Google's searches based on what it thinks you want to see. Yes. So you have to be careful on your search. Another one medication that a lot of people don't know about is actually anti-reflux medications. And a lot of babies, back to fussiness, we don't know what's going on, and we have colic. We're spitty babies. Instead of going like, maybe the food they're eating is actually not agreeing with their belly. Maybe the food mama's eating is not agreeing with the breastfed baby's belly. Instead of thinking that way, we go, and we have so much data to show that changing mom's diet or the formula brand actually reduces reflux and the need for medication. But instead, we give medications such as Zantac, which have a significant increase in increasing the risk of eczema.
Very, very interesting, because, I know back in the day, my son was put on that as well. I mean, he didn't have eczema, but he had a lot of ADHD, and, he was on the antibiotics. And so that Tylenol and that reflux medication, that was an amazing tip. And I think the listeners out there definitely need to write that one down for sure. Now, does stress, like I talk about stress all the time, I think that there's stress that we know it as, so stress that comes from a stressful life, but we also have internal stress. But does stress play a role in eczema? And, you were mentioning to me one time about this study, a famous study, the Quebec Ice Storm study. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in 1998, there was a massive ice storm in Canada, and it displaced hundreds of thousands of people. A lot of them were pregnant women. And for some reason, somebody decided that, hey, let's see what happens to these pregnant women. And it's called the ice storm study. That is totally not the name of it. I looked it up recently. My apologies. Anyway, so if you Google the ice storm study and long-term consequences, it pops up. It's no big deal. Yes. With some horrible pictures of what happened. But anyway, so what they did is they looked at they took the pregnant ladies in Canada that were displaced by the ice storm. And these mamas had to live with cousins and uncles in other towns and change their life and get rid of their stuff, whatever. And they compared this with other pregnant mamas that live in Canada. So we're in the same country. And they followed them out for 15 years.
Wow.
I know. And then they looked to see what was the endpoint. Did anything happen to their children? And they saw an increase in ADHD, neurological developmental issues, delay in neurocognitive function, speech delays, verbal delays, autism, eczema, asthma, diabetes, and cancer.
There you go. Mind-blowing.
And then there's studies from the UK, and there's meta-analyses that show a very strong correlation between maternal stress during pregnancy and eczema showing up in babies even up to 5 years old as related to pregnancy stress.
Wow. I mean, stress it's probably the silent killer, isn't it? It plays a role in probably most disease out there these days. Now, I'm very much about the gut, and I always talk about the gut-vein connection, but I'd love you to talk about the gut-skin connection and how does that affect eczema?
Yeah, Chinese medicine said 5,000 years ago, if your gut is not in check and lined up, the rest of you is going to be a mess. And, we were like, nah, so silly, no, and then the NIH did this study where they evaluated it's called the Human Genome Project. And they found, the 40,000 genes, blah, blah, blah. And then they go, oh, wait a second, for every one human cell, we're 10 bacteria cells. And wait a second, in our guts, there's 3.3 trillion bacteria that live, that drive our serotonin, which helps with anxiety, dopamine, which helps with ADHD, the immune system, which can be overactivated and worsen eczema. Wait a second, did you guys know that 3 to 4 pounds of the adult weight is actually bacteria weight from our gut? Mind blown. And we're like, wait a minute, maybe Chinese medicine was correct. Yes. Maybe there's a link. And so a lot of times, I sit there and I go, okay, well, when we look at eczema, people go, well, it's a skin issue. So I'm going to find the cream. I'm going to look for the one cream, the one detergent. And there's no one thing. We have to heal the skin from within. What's happening, and one of the reasons I love to treat eczema, not because I want to see kids in pain, but because you can see it. And you can't deny it, that it's there. So you can deny behavioral issues. You can deny belly issues, right? You can deny all these things. Eczema, you can't. It's right there. And what it is that the gut, usually what I tell people, whatever your child's skin looks like, that's what their gut looks like. It is an outside view of what the inside looks like.
Wow.
And when your skin from the outside is scratched and bleeding and cut apart and oozy, that's what the gut's looking like. And we're putting processed food in these bellies. And we're putting foods that are very inflammatory in these bellies. It's just basically putting the nails on eczema and just digging and scratching, and things keep getting worse and worse. And without healing the gut, paying attention to what's in your child's diet, in your own diet if you're nursing, it is very difficult to cure the skin with just a cream.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I love how you talk about it, in that the skin and what it looks like is a view into what your child's gut looks like. So we've talked about a couple of medications that, can break down the gut, which can cause eczema. We've talked about stress also doing that, and eczema and breaking down the gut. What are some other things that you have found to be sort of and I talk about a lot as well, and it's probably very similar to, what causes that gut breakdown. But from your point of view, and you focusing on eczema, what do you think are some of those other reasons for that gut breakdown?
So another one is going to be bacterial or fungus infections. And fungus is also very prevalent in my population because the kids have been exposed to a lot of antibiotics. With more antibiotics, we get rid of the good bacteria, and it's not like then there's just like an empty hole in your body. That empty space where the good bacteria used to be, but the antibiotics killed it off, now gets filled with kudzu-like characters, which we will call candida or yeast. And when the yeast takes over, not only does it inflame the neurological system, and we see behavioral and ADHD symptoms, it's when we see the red, scratchy, itchy skin. And it's not, a lot of people think yeast, they think vagina, penis, but it's more than that. You will see yeast issues manifesting in the skin. The same thing with bacteria. Now, bacteria in our body, right? So we talked about that for every one human cell with 10 bacteria cells. And there's always a balance. You can never get rid of bacteria. You can never get rid of viruses or fungi, contrary to what has been told to us in the past 2 years. You cannot eliminate these things. They are part of us. We are a microsystem, and we work together. And we have some bacteria that are good, and we have the bad. When we're not taking care of our good guests, the bad ones take over. I call them the hoodlums. And hoodlums in eczema are Staph aureus. And Staph aureus is in our body, comes out of our nose, out of our mouth, and populates the skin. And 90% of people with eczema have an overpopulation of Staph aureus. And this guy, not only is it causing itching, but actually breaks down the skin cells and causes the scratching and the deterioration of the skin from the outside. So a lot of people, again, we got to work from the skin from within, but we got to balance the microbiome from the outside. And again, so bacteria and yeast can be a huge problem. In our nutrition, we unfortunately have a lot of micronutrient deficiencies, like vitamin D, because we don't go outside and we become an indoor society. Vitamin D not only contributes to focus and attention, decrease anxiety, but also to your skin integrity, which means the strength of your skin. Zinc, which is imperative to zinc. So let me back up for a second. When we eat food, the food has to be digested, then has to be absorbed. into the body. Then it has to move through the blood cells and assimilate it into our cells, where it gets put like little building blocks inside our cells, and the cells get rid of the toxins and what it doesn't need. And so we eliminate. So there's a very specific pathway. So the zinc that we're supposed to get from food is needed for skin integrity. But if it's not in the soil, because the farmers have they did not rotate the crops, so they're using the same crops over and over again. They're not putting minerals in the soil. You could be eating some nuts and seeds that are high, they're supposed to be high in zinc, but they're in fact actually depleted of zinc because the soil has not been treated accordingly. You eat the food, then now the zinc has got to be absorbed, and digested. And if your digestion is off track, how are you going to get that zinc to go to the cells? So we have a lot of micronutrient deficiencies like D, zinc, and the other one is omega-3s. And omega-3s are not just powerful for ADHD. Well, of course, that's what I use too. But imagine our skin is surrounded by oil. So it's not necessarily just omega-3s, but we need fatty substances to keep our skin nice and plump, just like we need it for our plumpy brain. We need plumpy brain and plumpy skin. So those three are my most go-to. Of course, it could be B12 deficiency, vitamin E, vitamin A, so there are several other ones, but I'd say the ones that I see mostly in my clinic would be zinc, vitamin D, zinc, and omega-3s, and big micronutrients that are being overlooked. And then, not lastly, because there's so many things, but then we have the toxins in our environment, the water that we're drinking, what is in the water, what is in your water source. I live in a nice town. Our water is gross. And by all standards, they're like, it's fine. I'm like, well, I don't know that we should have arsenic in our water.
No, we shouldn't.
Right. And then we have fluoride. And then we know fluoride goes to the brain, well, also goes to the skin and our other organs. What about the air quality? Did you guys know that our indoor air quality is often worse than the outdoor air quality? Because we have candles and Febreze and scented things, and then our rugs and our tile. And, I'm not trying to drive everybody nuts, but
also a lot of people don't realize mold.
And then there's mold. We're done with podcast. Thank you so much, everyone. Because once mold enters the scene, it is a difficult thing. I had one of my patients actually, we're doing her eczema treatment and it's not getting better. And I'm like, we got to check for mold. They're like, we don't have mold. Our house is, it's very expensive and it's very big and it's beautiful. And I was like, yeah, anyway, so we're going to check for mold. They found black molds in the corner of the master bedroom where the babies were. And so the younger sibling after we found the mold, what did he start developing? Eczema. And then the daughter, in the highest amount of mold was actually in the wall of her bedroom and in the wall of the playroom. And they had moved there when she was 6 months old. When did her eczema begin? When she was 6 months old.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's rampant and people don't know about it and people don't talk about it. And I want to just go down that little avenue a little bit, because I think everyone should do an at-home mold test, no matter what, because I can tell you I've got a very similar story with a family that both kids have got anxiety and ADHD, and I did an organic acid test on them and I could see that there was aspergillus and black mold in their tests. And I'm like, do you have mold in your house? No, I don't think so. We're going to rip up the carpet soon. Then I got back the son's result. I'm like, I really think you need to get your house tested for mold. I'm seeing it here as well. They got it tested, 3-story house. The wall that ran down all 3 stories was riddled with black mold. The boy's bed head was against it. And the daughter's bedroom was on the other side of the house. So she had little patterns of mold, but he had big mold. They moved out and her symptoms went away. The mum's symptoms that she didn't even know she had went away. The son got a little bit better, but he needed an antifungal protocol for his body to get it out. And it was amazing. They got it remediated. They moved back in the house and all the symptoms came back, because even if you get it remediated, it can get into so many different things. So take out for everyone, make sure that you check your house for mold. I'm not trying to be an alarmist here, but it is a big problem when if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're not getting anywhere. The mold, and again, not everybody's sensitive to mold. Not everybody has, issues with mold. We're not supposed to be
have problems with mold, except some people are very sensitive and it
Mhm.
manifests very differently in some people. In your patient that, for example, that was ADHD, and both of my patients was eczema,
Eczema.
you
Yeah.
know, but a lot of people are like, oh, it's not. No, it is. It doesn't, it the beginning, the inciting event is the same, but the way it manifests is very different.
So different, so different. That's an amazing story, Anna Maria. I'm wondering, is there any part of it that's genetic?
There is absolutely a genetic component. So there's like specific genes that are the filaggrin, which is like a little protein that holds the cells together, your skin cells, and keeps them plump. It's basically like a little scaffolding, if you will. And then there's a specific gene that some people have a defective filaggrin, which then means that their cells if it manifests, because with genetics, just because you have the gene doesn't mean that it's actually showing up. But it is. And if your gene is actually showing up, then you're going to have more broken apart skin, more difficulties healing, more difficulty recovering. What I tell people about genetics is like, genetics load the gun and your environment pulls the trigger. Yes. Just because, a lot of people walk around like nothing you can do is genetic. I was like, if that was the case, then we would all have cancer and die. Because somebody in my family has cancer, right? And so that means there's a cancer gene going around, but it's never 100% sure. I mean, if you have genetic, like Down syndrome, that's a genetic, from birth thing that has happened. But a breast cancer gene, like the BRCA gene, which a lot of people know about, that's a terrible gene to have because 50% of people who have that gene will end up having breast cancer or ovarian cancer. Those are very high numbers.
Yes.
But what I hear in that story is 50% of people don't. Why don't they have cancer? What are they doing that they don't have cancer? And our research is based on, well, those people got cancer. What can we do? Obviously, it's needed so we can save people's lives. But there's no research being done on how come those people are not getting breast cancer and they have this gene? Because that's what I want to know. Because if I had that gene, I want to know what those people are doing so I can do all those things, because that gene might make you more susceptible to gluten, might make you more susceptible to mold, might make you more susceptible. And the story goes on and on. So there is absolutely a genetic component, but it's not 100% of the story.
Okay, so let's dive into a little bit about, so if they know, is this genetic component, can they actually test for that?
You can. I usually don't, because it doesn't, just because you have the gene, it doesn't tell me that that it's actually manifesting and we're actually seeing the illness. So yes, you can test for it. I just don't.
Yep. Okay. No, that makes sense. So, we've talked about what is eczema. We've talked about medications that aren't good for eczema. We've talked about that gut-skin connection. We've talked about how stress and other toxins and other environmental things can play such a big role in eczema. So you've got eczema. What do you do about it? What are some of those simple things that, our listeners today can take away from this and go, my kid's got eczema, what can I do today?
Got it. There are no simple things.
Okay.
The advice sounds simple. It's just not easy. Neither is healing from, ADHD.
Yep, for sure.
Recovery is very difficult. But here's some things that we can do. And just so you guys know, 2 of my kids had eczema and my dog. So I had to go, and my children were eating Pop-Tarts and chicken nuggets and juice boxes and fast food. You name a food that is not actually a food. It's more in the garbage category. That's what my family was eating. And I thought I was eating my fancy dog's good stuff too. But anyway, apparently he was kind of sensitive. Anyway, so what we learned from that is that from my journey is, number one, we're going to work on the processed food. Start taking note of how much processed food you have in your house. What is processed food? Processed food is food that comes in a package that you get from the grocery store, that's in your freezer, that is you just heat up in the microwave, like a little burrito, like a little pizza, like a little bagel sandwich. Those are granola bars, pretzels. Those are all processed foods. I'm not saying no to processed food, but how much are you really having? And then we're going to turn those packages around and we're going to read the ingredients. If you can't read it, don't eat it. Because if you can't read that ingredient, monosodium glutamate, and you don't know what that is, how is your body going to know what it is? So it's going to take monosodium glutamate from, Chick-fil-A nuggets and like look at them like, where am I going to put it? Oh, my brain, ADHD. Oh, I'll put it in my skin. Now I have eczema because the body doesn't know what to do with it. So number one, turn ingredients around. If you can't read it, don't eat it. As a general rule, try to keep your ingredient list on a package to less than 5. Once it goes above 5, we're starting to get into some nasties and some preservatives. Second thing in those foods, food coloring. Food coloring not only does it irritate the brain, it is a very strong correlation to eczema and allergic diseases. And then we're going to move to sugar. I know. Added sugar, the bane of my existence, because it's in everything and everything that says kids. Yes. So if you see a label that says kids on the front, like for example, Lovely Company, and I'm not beating up on companies, I'm just giving examples. Like Ripple Milk, they make a great product. I like some of the stuff that they have, but they have a Ripple Kids Milk. When you flip it around, loaded with sugar. You have like these protein bars that Cliff bars, right? That sound good. Kids Cliff bars, usually 13 to 20 grams of added sugar. Sugar dries up the skin. Sugar irritates the skin. Sugar causes eczema flares. I have a lot of folks that come in, they're like, we've heard about dairy, so we're not doing dairy. And I'm like, before the dairy, how's our sugar intake? Yes. Oh, well, we got to eat something. We gave up dairy, so we got to treat ourselves to something. I'm like, right, well, you skipped steps 1 and 2, and you went to 3. Dairy is number 3, processed foods with the food coloring you talked about. Sugar, you want to keep your sugar to less than 24 grams of added sugar per day. And my friends, this is where I'm going to be the fun police. Honey is added sugar. Maple syrup is added sugar. Coconut sugar is added sugar. Yeah. That's right. You think you get away with it? You can't. You can't escape it. It's in everything. So less than 24 grams of added sugar.
And I will preface that to say that I actually suggest kids with ADHD less than that. And
girl. Yes.
But you got to start somewhere.
Yes, I totally agree with you. We need to go stringent. But, I tell people 24 grams of added sugar and they literally lose their mind.
I know.
I would love it if we can get to have it a lot less. Yes, I totally agree with that. And then we go to dairy, and then we do gut healing. So we need, and we got to replace our minerals and vitamins. We got to start healing our gut with proper supplements that are right for you and your child. And even if you're nursing, my mamas, and you're eating the processed foods and sugar, that's going right to baby. Yeah. And it's really hard for my pregnant mamas and my nursing mamas, because you're like, but I'm nauseated and I don't feel good and I'm sleep deprived. And guess what? When we're sleep deprived, we don't crave Brussels sprouts. We crave sugar and processed foods. Right? Yes. So those would be kind of the stepwise approaches that I go through.
Fantastic. And so what are your thoughts on gluten and eczema?
So gluten is number 4 in the elimination process. Yep. It's very interesting. We eliminate gluten, and I have kids. Actually, my son is sensitive. He found out that his sensitivity was truly gluten. But when we do the food reintroduction, because the goal of food elimination is not that then we just never have these foods ever again. That doesn't even make sense. Is that we remove them temporarily, and then we bring back in once our gut is healed. And what we notice is that when we at food reintroduction, when kids eat gluten, a lot of them, their eczema doesn't flare, but their behavior goes off the chain. Yes. And they're like, well, could it be that, my 2-year-old, maybe that's just tantrums? And I'm like, well, the tantrums as bad as they were, like, it doesn't seem like. I'm like, well, take the gluten back out again and let's see what happens. 99% of the time, they're like, wow. I'm like, yeah. So we can see gluten. Yes, it affects eczema, but one of the things that we see very clearly in the nervous system.
Yes, definitely. No, for sure. And that's what we see as well. I talk very much about, gluten, dairy, soy-free, all the things that you're talking about, artificial colors, all of that sort of stuff. And we do test back foods, except I say never test back gluten. And that's just my approach. But I just find that kids with these ADHD type issues, it's that slippery slide back to where they came from. But with eczema, that's good to know that, the eczema doesn't flare for those kids that don't have those behavioral issues.
Right. And then also, but I'm with you though. We don't want to go back to the place where we were.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's what I tell people too. I'm like, so if you can tolerate gluten, well, that doesn't mean that we're now eating gluten every day.
Yes.
That means like you'd get it twice a week.
Yes.
Without when you go out to eat, it's not a big deal. Same thing with any of the other things. Because we, what you were doing before wasn't serving you. So we don't want to go back to that place.
1,000%.
And we want to learn from that. And it's going to be a new journey. And just like for your patients, when families come in, they're in a rut, whatever that is, sometimes a healthy rut, sometimes an unhealthy, but it doesn't matter. It's still a rut. And when we're in that rut, we're eating those same foods over and over again, even if it's organic and classical and grass-fed and all that stuff, but it's still the same foods. And then when you go through my program, as you go through your program, what we teach everybody is like, well, let's think outside of the rut and look at all the other options that they have.
The amazing foods out there.
So many amazing foods. And then if they're done with my course, as I'm sure when they're done with your course, now they have so many more options. Why would you go back to that limited diet you had before when now you have so many more things that you can experiment and enjoy?
Definitely. You are preaching to my heart here, for sure, for sure. So we've got reducing stress. We've got cleaning up the diet. We've got some core-based supplements if they're deficient. So zinc, vitamin D, and omega. Anything else that you want to drop in as little nuggets to our listeners out there?
We got to talk about back to stress, because one of the things, that I do in my eczema course, I do Facebook Lives every week, and we always begin with a mindset discussion, and people walk away, not just like take this supplement, this probiotic or this digestive enzyme, whatever. It's, we go into like, all right, what is our mindset today? How have we helped another mama in this group? How have you reached out and been a friend to someone else? Because we get so wrapped up in our misery, and we've been taught in the past 2 years to just be isolated, to be alone, to do it by ourselves. And then, the access to social media and all the information we have, it's like, we should be able to do it by ourselves. And so we become lonely, isolated, and stressed out of our minds. And so my thing, I'm like, but the moment we start changing our mindset, we start blaming others for what's going on. We start carrying the guilt, because the maternal guilt is massive. Yes. It is enormous. And then on top of that, you have a child with chronic disease that you felt you ate sugar during your pregnancy, or you had the genetics, or you took the antibiotics, or you said okay to the antibiotics, right? So then you're like, it's my fault they have eczema. So we work on the maternal guilt, on reducing that, because the more we work on reducing the stress, the more we parent and heal our children better. Yeah. We become better, our children are better. And it's just something that we don't often go. When you go to a dermatologist, right? Boom, Dupixent. You go to the allergist, boom, topical steroid. Nobody goes, hey, mama, how are you doing? Yeah. How's your stress level with this bleeding child? What are you doing for you so you're not losing your mind? Because if the mamas don't take care of themselves,
they don't.
Right? The house is going to fall apart. So, for kids with ADHD, the screaming, the tantrums, the oppositional defiance, I have had one child with that. So I know what it is. But that is kind of where, find somebody. My nugget is, find somebody that speaks your language, that understands what your mission is. If your mission is medicine, you're okay. That's okay. You do you. But if your mission is not medicine and you want more natural approach, find somebody who speaks your language, not somebody who belittles you, not somebody who makes fun of you. Somebody today flew in from Arizona to see me today for eczema. And we were talking about it, and she told me that the last pediatrician she went to and told him about some of the changes she made in the diet, he looked at her point blank and said, why would you do all the diet changes? Food has nothing to do with eczema. Where are you getting your information? Are you watching TikTok?
Oh my gosh.
I can't. And I go, actually, I'm on TikTok. So you just say yes.
Yes, I got it from Dr. Anna Maria Temple on TikTok. Yeah. I can tell you, I have had the same experience when my son was diagnosed with ADHD. I went into the doctor once I started researching and all of this stuff, and I said, can we look at his gut? Can we do a food sensitivity panel? And I'm going to change his diet. And he goes, don't bother. None of that works.
Over and over again. Yeah. And we're here to tell you guys, it works every time.
Every single
every time. Yep.
Yeah. So if you have a feeling that you want to do medicine, as Dr. Anna Maria said, that is totally fine. You've got to give yourself permission to do that. But if you want to take the natural approach, seek out people that are going to help you do that. Dr. Anna Marie, amazing eczema specialist. She is fantastic. And this has been such a wonderful time with you today. I want to thank you for joining me and sharing your amazing knowledge, your amazing energy, and your experience with all our listeners today.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is awesome because we do, in what I see in the kids that have not had their eczema cared for as babies, as infants, as toddlers, they are the kids who end up with ADHD. So if they don't see me from the beginning, they end up working with you at a later date. So, I mean, I'm always like, let's talk about it. Let's do it a little different.
Yes.
If we could prevent all this, wouldn't it be so much easier and less expensive? We can just not go through all these steps and all these learning things that we have to do when our children are sick with chronic disease.
Yes, definitely. And I think that you are spot on there. Let's talk about prevention rather than, coming at it once you've got those terrible symptoms. Dr. Anna Maria, please tell listeners where they can find you online.
Absolutely. Actually, you can find me at Costco, Walmart, and Target. And you'll see myself videoing myself. It's what I do on Sundays because I am passionate about inspiring and educating families on how to feed their families better. And I get a lot of pushback on cost as a problem. So I go to these various stores to show you how to shop, how to look for ingredients. We do price checks because wellness should be accessible to everybody. Wellness should not just be a privilege for the rich. And, all these videos are on YouTube and my Instagram and TikTok, and it's DRANA Maria Temple.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you once again so much for joining me. It was an absolute pleasure having you. Listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's episode of The Soaring Child. I'm Dana Kay, your ADHD health practitioner. Keep on thriving. Thank you for listening to the Soaring Child podcast today. To learn more about how to help your child with ADHD soar using natural strategies, visit our website at adhdthriveinstitute.com and follow us on social media at ADHD Thrive Institute.